Welcome once again to the Revenue Throughput Podcast. I'm your host, Jose Palomino, and today's guest is Sean Johal of Elevation Leaders, a scaling up consultancy. And he works with businesses between $5 and $100 million in revenue, and he helps them really get their act together in terms of scaling up. So we're very excited to have Sean on our show. Let's get started. And welcome, Sean, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
All right, thanks for having me, Jose.
No, absolutely. Very, very excited to have you, because I think some of the stuff that I know you do is especially relevant to our listeners, of mostly business owners of B2B companies. So, Sean, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your current practice, what you're up to, and then we'll dig in from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a little quick background, and don't worry, I won't go to when I was born. I'll keep it a little tighter. I came from a very bad family bankruptcy. We had a lighting business, and my father-in-law had grown it from 0 to 50 million within 7 years. An amazing success story. When the recession hit in 2007, 2008, we made one bad company purchase, and the whole thing came crashing down. So it was a very difficult time for the family. In that moment, my brother-in-law and I had an opportunity to buy 3 of the divisions and start from scratch. So we started this LED lighting company called Dals Lighting. And, the first couple of years were tough, like most entrepreneurs. You're doing what you can. We couldn't even get a bank to support us, believe it or not. But a couple of years in, we got a bit of stability. We were feeling a little bit better about ourselves. We thought, okay, we got a bit of a business here. And then our biggest competitor came out and basically copied our entire product line, literally 200 products, offered them at $1 less in the market. So it was a huge shock, but looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened to us. So what we did at that time is that we said, you know what, we need a bit of help. So we went externally and looked for a coach, and there was this new methodology starting. It was called the Rockefeller Habits in those days. It's called Scaling Up Today, written by Vern Harnish. And, we hired a coach, and the joke is that we found this one coach, and she had no experience, and she'd never coached any clients. And the only reason we hired her is because she could speak French. And, our company's in Montreal. We have a lot of French-speaking employees and team members. But we brought her on board. It ended up being an amazing experience. And I won't go through all the details, but basically from 2013 to 2020, we were able to 3x our revenue and 10x our business valuation during those years. And the company's still going strong. About 2 years ago, I decided to follow my passion and become a scaling up coach myself. And so now I have a company called Elevation Leaders, and we help companies 10x their business valuations across, I was going to say North America, but it's become global with the pandemic at this point.
Wow. Well, I met Vern at a Entrepreneurial Forum of Philadelphia meeting. We were both platform speakers that day. And at the time it was the Rockefeller Habit. So it really appealed to me, just the simplicity, common sense, but depth behind the methodology. So when you work with a typical, well, maybe there's no typical, but what would you consider a typical business that really would benefit from your services for the kinds of things you do?
Sure, absolutely. So, there's obviously a difference between the size and the business and their needs. So, typically we like to work with businesses that are anywhere between 5 and 100 million in size. We do work sometimes with smaller companies that are on very fast growth paths. Mm-hmm. It's just a little more challenging when they don't have the entrepreneurs don't have a strategic team around them, helping them get through the day to day. And when you expect one entrepreneur to just do everything, more solopreneurs, it doesn't really work in the process. So that's, typically the size of business. There's a lot of different reasons why people want to get into the methodology. I see 3 different specific reasons. Number one, which is most common, they hit a wall. So they've hit a wall. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to advance forward. And they think, you know what, I need help as quickly as possible. Number 2 is when a company is just coasting. It's fine. Things are not falling apart at the seams, but it's in neutral. There's no real growth. There's no real action. Nothing's really happening. And then situation number 3, which is not as often, but it does happen, is when a company is on a very fast growth path, but they have no idea how to control it. It's just sales are coming in, revenue is flying in, but they have the wrong people in the wrong seats. Things are just going all over the place. They are growing, but they're not profitable and they're not doing it the right way. So those are typically the 3 different situations I'll see.
I'd like to dig into that last one, that fast growth model for a moment, because what I could see and what I've seen as well is companies growing and the owner's not making any more money. Costs are growing faster than the top line. I mean, they just, and they think they can throw bodies at it and so on. So how do you get an owner to, just get a hold of that fact that, okay, whatever you've been doing, yes, it's driving your top line, and that looks, that's a satisfying number to see your top line grow fast. but that's not the name of the game. How resistant are owners to seeing that, whoa, I have to press on the brakes here and rethink everything?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So, you know this, Jose, there's two different categories at that point when you're in that fast growth, not making money or losing money. You have the companies that are actually built that way. So you'll have companies that are raising public money or that have their VC backed. And for them, it's all about, churn and burn. It doesn't really matter. They're just going for this huge revenue number, and whatever happens, happens. And they can, they have the expectation to not be profitable. That's the exception. The more commonplace is that a private owner is having so much growth, and like you said, they're not profitable. They're just hitting that, either break even or a lot of times losing money on the year-to-year basis. But they think to themselves, I can't say no to any opportunity. I get in there and our team goes in and says, first we do a diagnostic and we say, okay, what is working, what isn't working? And we will really dive deep into the numbers to really understand, okay, why aren't you profitable? Are you making certain decisions? Are you sacrificing? What is it that we're doing that's causing us to be bleeding cash at this point? So we'll do a thorough analysis on that end. And a lot of times, it really comes down to the same thing. It's growth only for the sake of growth. It's just almost vanity. It's this idea of, well, I got to keep getting bigger and bigger. And I always tell these owners, I would much prefer to have a $10 million business that's making, $2 million a year and it's 20% profitability than being a $100 million business that makes that same number, because the amount of problems and issues and things that happen at that level are so traumatic that, you're going to be stressed out and burnt out all day.
And you talked about hitting like a recession. So one of the problems with that larger size with thin margins is the ability to sustain a setback. Like it really can all come unravel very fast because you're burning the amount of cash that you need to keep it alive is so great at that size.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to us. As in our family business that was public, we were building this massive head office that had, you're buying all these companies, they're very successful. They have their own marketing teams, they have their own sales teams, their own engineering teams. But now you're putting this head office in place, and at the head office, you're putting a VP finance, a VP marketing, a VP sale, but they're not bringing that much added value to these already successful companies. So I learned it the hard way, through our family business, that we had ballooned the costs across the board, really hurt us in the end. And that lesson has taught us well into our new business. We're incredibly conservative for the growth that we've had. We've never had 1 month in the red. So that's our claim to fame. We're always making sure we're profitable month to month, even throughout the growth. It can be done. And that's what I teach entrepreneurs. It's profitable growth. That's my biggest interest, really.
And what's interesting about that too is, and then we'll move off at this point, but it's just an interesting point. It doesn't happen overnight. This scaling up of cost that's eating up into profitability. It's more like the proverbial frog in the kettle. Like over time, also like you said, when you put those executives in the home office, that all made sense at the time. You wanted more control. You had all these different things. But before you know it, each of these things are like double six-figure headcounts, and you have 10 of them, and all of a sudden it's real money.
Exactly. It just ballooned out of control very quickly. And like you said, it is a slow situation, a slow process. You don't really see it. The one thing that we're implementing now from, with our customers very often that makes a big impact is the lean methodology, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I've realized that if you can implement lean, and there's this myth around lean being for manufacturing companies, it's not true. Lean can be implemented in an online business. It can be implemented into a SaaS business. It doesn't matter. It's all about eliminating waste that's not giving value to your customer at the end of the day. And so I've gotten really, really obsessed with, once we get the strategy organized and we kind of get the foundational pieces in place, then we'll bring in, our lean experts and really help companies take that to the next level.
Yeah, no, lean definitely. It's really a mindset, right? It's a way of looking at everything we're doing and asking the question, do we need to do this? But so this brings me to your second and first point, the coasting and hitting the wall, right? Scenarios. So privately held companies, owner's been in charge since they founded the company or they inherited the company, whatever. It's 20 years later, they've been doing this. And what I often find when I walk into there is that they have people in roles that they're not really ideally suited for. But Larry's been with us for 20 years, so I can't do anything about Larry. And Mary, she's been here since we had the first phone put in or whatever. So how do you deal with that, like that reality to the owner that, some of the decisions you have in front of you, if you want to turn this around, if you want to move from coasting to growth or from sliding to health, are going to require some tough personnel decisions.
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult situation. And I see it in the majority of companies. So the majority of times when I go into a business, I come in with the Jim Collins philosophy that's people first, right? People first and then process second. When you're going into there, I do a quick analysis of seeing what the team looks like. Do we have the right players in the right seats? And I would say to you about 95% of the time, there's issues and majoritarily big issues.
Yeah.
And people, they seem very unwilling to look at those facts and admit it. So we put them through a very clear assessment where we're asking the owners and the managers about the business to rate all of the employees and say, okay, does the employee get their job? Do they want to be in their job? And are they capable of doing it? Those are three big questions that we like to ask. That comes actually from the EOS system, which I really love those questions. Then we'll take them through, kind of the A-player chart to see where they fit on there. Is it someone we want to clone in the business? And then we'll go through their Jim Collins 5 levels of leadership. That gives us enough information, and we do that on a quarterly basis to know if the employee is really thriving in the business. The biggest issue we have are, first of all, you have people that are very complacent. So the ones you just described, the examples, people who are nice and they're loyal, but they don't have the competencies to take the business to the next level. They're one category that could be problematic. But the bigger category that's actually more problematic are what we call the brilliant jerks. So the brilliant jerks are those people who are incredibly productive.
I love that phrase, by the way.
Yeah, they're incredibly productive, and they could even be loved by your clients and your customers, but they just do not care about company culture. They don't care about the values. They don't care about the vision. They care about themselves, and all they're doing at the end of the day is worrying if they will succeed. They're cancers in the organization, and those are really the ones we end up overprotecting most of the time, because entrepreneurs want productive people, right? So they'll say, I can't let go of that person. They're so productive. They're pumping out this many orders, or they're bringing in this many sales. And I say, okay, fair enough, but they're absolutely destroying your company culture. So your company is actually underperforming because people like this are alienating all the A players. So we really have to come to that reality. I've no longer become shy because in our business, we changed about 80% of our team over 7 years. So we actually did this huge turnover. It didn't happen overnight, like you were mentioning. It's a slow process. But once we started removing these people who are cancerous to the culture, and by the way, those are not bad people. They're going to do well at other companies that fit better their style and what they're trying to accomplish. They just didn't fit what our business was trying to do. Once we did that cleansing, it just made a huge difference. And I would say we have, I truly think a world-class culture at this point.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because, the term culture, and I know in the owner-led business community, people have been in O-line businesses, industrial categories, and so on. They understand culture. These are smart people. They read and so on. But it's hard for them to get their heads wrapped around what does that mean for them. They can understand why a GE or Raytheon or Pfizer have, and they're even a little bit afraid of people who are like the head of culture or and things like that. So we don't want to be that because we're a family business. We have our culture. But you come in as an outsider and you realize, your culture is not all that you think it is. And it's not the positive force you think it is. Yeah. How do you have that conversation with an owner who's not even sure it's not a little too touchy-feely?
It really takes time. You can't do it overnight. I realize that, the times I've made mistakes where I've come in too aggressively and really told them, because I see it quickly. For me, it's literally a 30-minute thing. Once I'm working with the strategic team, we start talking about how the business is going. We start digging deeper. It's very easy. And
the clues are evident, right?
Yeah, it's very evident. And why the company is not succeeding. A lot of times it's just that you don't have the right composition of people. And so, I like to ask that first question. The first question is very simple. What percentage of your team overall would you enthusiastically rehire? So I'm saying enthusiastically. That means you have to be high-fiving. Everybody's excited. They're getting the balloons out. We're having a party because we're rehiring this employee. And the average that I get is anywhere between 25 and 40%. Mm-hmm. They'll admittedly say that. So I say to them, okay, so that means that anywhere between 60 and 80% of your team, you would not enthusiastically rehire. That means we have a massive issue in the organization. That means you have a lot of people that you would actually wish to change and you wouldn't rehire. So that really serves as the foundation of the discussion. It starts from there. And then we start going and I explain to them, listen, the process is very careful because we are not analyzing every single team member over quarters. So, after 2 quarters, 3 quarters, so now we're 3 quarters of the year in, you've done Q1, Q2, Q3, and the same person is always in red and they're always causing issues in the organization. It's easy for me to look at the strategic team and look at that manager in the eyes and say, hey, Jose, look at this. We're 9 months in and you haven't done anything about this employee who's, and you're telling us every meeting is causing problems. wouldn't you think it's time to move on and maybe, look at replacing them? So it's a process. Usually within the first year, we end up getting to those tough decisions, but it does take time.
Wow. Well, it's interesting about that because I've certainly had those conversations, generally more around the sales area, where people really overestimate the value that their salespeople provide and the skill level. They're not, and sometimes it's just they've never seen it done right, or they've never seen what a high performing sales team could do because they never had one, or they're grudgingly, or they end up hiring very much on the journeyman low end of the totem pole because they think that's what they can afford. And as a result, you have people that are just not that productive. And I even told one owner once, I said, why don't you tell, just call him Joe, Joe drives you crazy every time he's in the office, but you don't want to let him go. So in January, just pay him his salary up front and tell him not to come into the office. At least you solve half your problem. And then he realized what he was doing there. So, that's a great way to look at it, though. The enthusiastically rehiring. I ask a version of that question around customers. Basically,
Like
just
that.
saying which customer would you clone, right? Which one do you, and then why, and really dig into that. So when they hit a wall, that's the third category there. They're not coasting, but they hit a wall, and maybe it's culture, maybe it's a broken process, whatever. Uh, what kind of things do you see that tell you? You said like within 30 minutes you see some things. So somebody tells you, listen, we used to be, and I'm sure you've heard this when you say how big is your company? You say, well, 5 years ago we were 18 million. Well, what are you this year? And they say 10 million. So you're a $10 million company. You're not an $18 million
Yeah.
company. That was then, this is now. What do you do when somebody hits a wall and there has to be some real radical hard change? How do you broach that? And how do you help them see what needs to be done?
Yeah, typically when we're seeing situations like that, there's multiple issues, right? Often it's not just this one easy fix where you're walking in and saying, "Oh, listen, you have this broken process. Let's quickly fix it up, and you're good to go. You'll be back to 18 in no time." A lot of times they've let a lot of bad habits seep into the entire business, and that's why the scaling up methodology works so well because we're really looking at all four pillars, right? We're looking at people, strategy, execution, and cash. So you can't hide because we're going through every single segment of the business. Typically, when we do our initial assessment, we'll see very quickly what's the weakest points and what's the strongest points because the assessment really tells us and shows us what they're doing well and what's weaker, and then plus the people analysis. But typically we'll go in there and we're really going to try to pinpoint the biggest issues off the top. We're going to really pinpoint them, figure them out. We are going to do the strategy piece to make sure that everybody's fully aligned, but then as we figure out what's going wrong, we're going to really go after those one by one and start addressing them. It's different for every single company. Some companies are super disorganized on a cash perspective. Let's say, for example, their cash conversion cycle, which not many people talk about, which is the single biggest reason people have good cash flow. It's how slowly you can pay out and how quickly you can bring money in. I'll often notice that their cash conversion cycle for many businesses is a total disaster. And we had that as a disaster for our business. We bring in LED lighting from overseas. We bring in the product, we're paying deposits on it. It takes 90 days before it's ready, another 45 days on the water to get to us. Now we're already approximately 4.5, 5 months in, and we've paid fully for all the product. We haven't even started selling it. By the time we get paid, it's another 3-4 months. So we had a cash conversion cycle that was almost 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine how bad that was for our cash flow. It was absolutely horrible. Our bank didn't want to lend us any more money. We went in and fixed that by, over time consolidating suppliers, coming with much, much better terms. And now we were able to reduce that from 9 months to about a month. And that for our cash flow has been unbelievable. So you can do tricks like that going into businesses. A lot of times businesses are just not focusing on these things. I always say to them, well, what are your terms with your suppliers? Oh, it's 30 days. I'm like, why is it 30 days? Well, that's how they work. I said, well, why don't you negotiate it? Well, what do you mean? I said, negotiate your supplier, get yourself even 5 more days, get 10 more days, find a way to pay it out a little slower, and let's get receivables tightened up. And oftentimes we can just make a difference there on cash flow. We could literally bring in a couple $100,000 of money quicker into the business. So there's a lot of tricks like that we can get into and look at quickly, but it's a lot of foundational work that gets ignored over time, right? They get busy, they get overwhelmed. They don't have time to look at the business. They're in the business. They're never working on the business.
So that kind of brings me to just the last part of our time together. And Sean, we could probably go for hours on this because this is a really great set of topics, and it's clear you've done this and you're having great success working with folks on this. But I think the elephant in the room is this, especially with owner-led businesses. At least what I found is that the number one challenge to growth, to healthy businesses, to organizing, all these things you described, is almost always the owner. It's not the other people. So so now you're engaging with the owner and you're observing and you're saying, wow, really the issue, it might be Larry, Bob, and Mary and Nancy, but you know, it's really a lot of right here in the room the issue. So I'm just curious, how do you help an owner see them, look in the mirror and see the things that they have to change,
Yeah.
and that it's not just everyone else?
That's an incredible question. And obviously, you have a lot of insight, Jose, to understand that. I call it the 10% rule. Okay. That's the way my experience has given to me doing this for the last 3 or 4 years. There's about 10% of owners that think they want to change their company and they're open minded and they're transparent and they're honest, and they're absolutely not. And in those cases, literally, there is nothing to be done because it's almost you need to completely change the individual, and that's, for as far as I'm concerned, impossible to change someone's complete mindset. They have to be willing to take the steps. So I've worked with a few companies. I do a pretty crazy vetting process. I've gotten really good at it, whereas earlier in my coaching career I was kind of saying yes to any client. Now I meet with them and I can tell pretty quickly if they're going to be the right type of candidate for scaling up. Because to your point, I've had situations where we've done strategic planning, literally 2 full days. We're in it. The owner's with us the whole time. We're doing the planning. We're doing the vision building. We're looking at their 3-year capacities, 1-year priorities, 90-day plan. We're deciding on people, what we're going to be doing, who we're going to hire as our hiring needs. And literally 4:59 p.m. on day 2, we're finishing up, and the owner will drop a bomb saying, this was a disaster. What was this whole process we just did? It doesn't work. I don't agree with our plan. And then the whole team is just this complete deflation, right?
Absolutely.
Like
I have been
it's
in that
over.
meeting.
Yeah, you've been in that meeting. We've all been there. And so it doesn't work. I always tell there's only 2 reasons why scaling up is not going to work. The owner is not truly buying in and is not willing to share, because it's a collaborative process. So I never have the owner just telling us what we're going to do. I said, bring smart people around the table. If you don't have enough of the right people, I'll help you bring those people to the table. But we're going to do this as a team because it can't be dependent on you. We're trying to build a business that you could just leave, number one. So that's super important. So if the owner is not willing, that's issue number 1. And issue number 2 is when the overall team or company doesn't have the discipline, because it is a discipline. It is a rigorous process where we're putting in daily huddles and weekly meetings and monthly touch points, and everybody has to buy in. I make sure there's a communication from the top all the way to the lowest end. The person who's just coming in and assembling product. Everyone's buying into this, and if you don't get everyone's buying, it doesn't work.
Wow. Well, Sean, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate so much your insights on this. They really resonate with me because I feel sometimes I've been in some of these meetings you've described. So it's pretty interesting. It also tells me I'm not losing my mind, that yes, this is the way the world is. So Sean, if somebody listening wanted to learn more about what you do and what you're about, what's the best way they can find out more about you and maybe even get in contact with you and so on? And we'll include this in the show notes, but I'd like to just say it out verbally if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. 2 places to go. Our new website just launched, elevationleaders.com. So that's the best place to go. And you'll find me on LinkedIn, at Sean Johal. I'm incredibly active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of different things about, business growth. So you'll see me in there as well.
Fantastic. Sean, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jose. I loved it. Really appreciate it.